so much for Thank you so much for joining us today. We are the Community Service Society of New York, and we're an anti-poverty organization that has been around in the city since 1843 in one form or another, and have been focused on housing for as long as we've existed. CSS, a very long time ago, was involved in drafting the city's first tenement laws and have done organizing around homelessness in the 1980s and have been engaged in fights for stronger rent regulation since the rent laws existed in the city in their current form since 1973. My name is Oksana Mironova. I'm a senior policy analyst here at CSS, and I'm here with Hillary Wilson and Samuel Stein, who are both also senior policy analysts working on housing and budget issues. I'm just gonna give space now for my colleague to acknowledge any council members in the room because I don't see who's in the room.
I believe we are all staffers among us.
Okay, great. Cool. Thank you so much. I am going to move on to our agenda for the day. Thank you for joining us again. We're here to talk about a great campaign that is being launched next week that focuses on the city's housing budget. The campaign is focused on two particular programs that are currently underfunded, Neighborhood Pillars and Open Doors. I will go through what those programs are and what they do, and talk a little bit about their positioning in our current housing market and the city's potential role in interfering in that market. Then we will cover a little bit, talk a little bit about the budget, where things stand now, and how HPD could function better if it was better funded, and talk about how this particular campaign connects to other legislative campaigns that are also in play at this moment. We will end with next steps, our ask to you about what we would like you to pay attention to as you think about the budget, and then have about 15 minutes for Q&A as well, if any questions come up. Just a couple of logistics. Please keep yourself on mute. If questions arise as we're going through our presentation, you could put them in the chat, and we could either address them immediately if it's something quick, or if it's something that needs a little bit more explanation, we will leave them for the Q&A. So to talk a little bit about the campaign, we're partnering with the Progressive Caucus and the New York City Comptroller's Office to call for a capital investment of $2 billion over the next 4 years for two housing programs that already exist that could be extremely helpful in meeting the current prices in the city as it stands, to create and preserve permanently affordable housing in the city. These particular programs will provide stability and equity building opportunities for BIPOC, immigrant, and low-income New Yorkers. Specifically, the two programs that we're focused on are Neighborhood Pillars and Open Door. One is a preservation program, the other is a new construction program. And we believe that with an investment of $2 billion over 4 years, so that's $500 million per year, we could produce or preserve about 10,000 units in the city. The ask is split between two programs. As I've mentioned, the first one is Neighborhood Pillars, and this is a preservation program. The program was launched in December 2018, and even though that's when it started, it's sort of, it is kind of, the conception goes back to the foreclosure crisis that impacted the whole world, but impacted the city and its multifamily market in leading up to 2008, and had kind of like a long shadow and after effects that continue to this day. The program launched, it preserved about 400 apartments, was fairly successful. And then its budget was slashed to zero in 2020, and it has been dormant since. Um, what it does is that it works with mission-driven developers to rescue distressed multifamily buildings that are on the market. It provides loans and tax exemptions so the mission-driven developers could work to rehabilitate um, distressed buildings, to buy up and rehabilitate distressed buildings, and to turn them into affordable housing that is permanent. Um, and the goal of bringing this program back now is to really scale it back to its original vision and to let it fulfill the vision that was set out for it in the beginning. The second program that we are focused on is Open Door. And this is a new construction program that would provide financing for the development of shared equity cooperatives. Shared equity co-ops include the actual like existing shared equity co-ops that we have today include Mitchell-Lamas and HDFCs, and they tend to be really popular both amongst people who live in them and also the communities that surround them. But the city doesn't really focus on new construction of shared equity co-ops. There are a couple of one-up projects that happen every single year, some of them funded with Open Door, and others funded with state and federal money, but there's not much of this type of development happening. In our analysis of data provided through the Housing Vacancy Survey, we found that Black and Latino New Yorkers represent 2/3 of all occupants living in limited and shared equity co-ops, compared to 1/3 who live in regular types of home ownership developments like condos or co-ops or single family homes. So these programs have done a really good job in maintaining stability amongst both low-income New Yorkers and New Yorkers of color. And we feel like it's really important for the city to continue to fund these types of developments. And Open Door, because it already exists, it doesn't require new legislation, is a great way of doing that. And what we're calling for is an increase in its budget and also a revision in its term sheets to make it more aligned to the way that the market functions now.
Sana, if I can interrupt, I just want to recognize Housing and Buildings City Council Chair, Pierina Sanchez, has joined us, and I wanted to give her an opportunity to say a few words if she'd like.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, Sana. Sorry, I meant to be here right before you started to. No, I just wanted to join in and say to our colleagues in the council, we've been working really hard and thinking really hard about what is achievable in this budget situation, in this council mayor relationship, and given the vast need for stabilizing New Yorkers in their homes. And a lot of that thinking has led us to this focus, right, on housing, not just for now, but housing for future generations. And I, as housing chair, as someone who represents the community with the income and demographic profile and housing struggles that I do, just personally wanted to thank folks for hopping in here, hoping that you will be supportive of this ask as the speaker comes to us and asks us our priorities as individual members and as delegation members and all the rest, to say that, we've been in the council, many of us, for 2 years. We haven't seen the corresponding, response in budgets in the last two budget cycles, and definitely not from the mayor in terms of an investment in housing that is, up to the scale of what we're seeing in terms of the crisis, right? So housing is the number one issue that people identify as needing to solve. We have the lowest vacancy rate in the last 60 years, as I'm sure Oksana is going to highlight if she hasn't already. And what that means is that, and the data point that really got me actually emotional this week during this hearing is, low income people are being replaced. Low and middle income people are being replaced in the city of New York by households, small households of one in two people that earn over $200,000 a year. That is what is happening right now. People are fleeing. Black New Yorkers are leaving. Latino New Yorkers are leaving. Low-income people are leaving. We are seeing a hyper gentrification of New York City, and that was exacerbated by the pandemic at a scale that we have never seen before. We've talked about, and we know that we've seen it in pockets like parts of Brooklyn and Harlem. But what we're seeing now, quite literally citywide, is the replacement of low-income New Yorkers, and it is not sustainable. It is not the way. No city can survive without income diversity. We all depend on each other, and it really comes to the housing policies that we pursue. So, with that, you're going to hear all of the really important grounding data and information about this campaign and the details from Oksana and the advocates here. But I just wanted to join and just highlight that we're in a crisis moment. Low-income people are being shoved out of the city, and we can do something about it in all the ways that we fight, but by also pushing for the creation of this permanent affordable housing and these co-op conversions and all the rest, right, in our housing stock. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Councilmember Sanchez. It's a yeah, the scale of the crisis that we're in cannot be overstated, whether it's the record numbers of homelessness in the city or the results of the HVS that just came out, where the vacancy rates for low rent apartments, so apartments under $1,500 a month, are 0.39 or something like that. It's essentially like a statistical way of saying that they're non-existent. So focusing on both preservation of buildings that are distressed and new construction is really key. But the grounding that focus in creating housing that actually serves that population is super important. And I think that with both of these programs that we're highlighting today, the opportunity is there. It's just a question of funding. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about the conditions that our current rental market is in. We're in kind of a weird moment where we're coming off of the pandemic. The economic impacts of the pandemic are still felt. We're also in a moment where the changes to the rent laws that happened in 2019 on the state level are coming into focus as well, especially in certain portions of the media and in the negotiations that are happening on the state level. And there has been a lot of focus on the presumptive impact of the HSDPA on the rental market, which isn't basically isn't correct, to put it simply. So we know that there was one high-profile collapse of a multifamily lender in the city's Signature Bank, and another lender that funds a lot of that holds a lot of loans that underwrite rent stabilized and other multifamily properties in the city. New York Community Bank is in trouble as well. And there are rent stabilized buildings that are selling at a pretty big discount. If you take a look that goes back longer than 2019, so if you actually look at the rental market as it has been since the 70s and since the 90s, we see decades of lending and real estate practice in the city that were defined by both over-leveraging and business practices that really banked on displacement of low-income tenants, which lead to the replacement of population that Councilmember Sanchez talked about, where we're seeing the loss of low-income families and families of color in the city. We know that in the post-foreclosure market, landlords built up their portfolios by buying discounted rent-stabilized buildings and over-leveraging them. So this was the moment where all multifamily markets across the country and across the world collapsed because of the foreclosure crisis. instead of putting money into buildings, landlords would over leverage their properties. So basically take out huge mortgages on their buildings and pull that money out to expand their real estate portfolios. So what you would have is buildings that were physically collapsing, where tenants were experiencing awful, awful conditions that were worth millions and millions of dollars on paper. So the mortgages in these buildings were underwritten by banks that understood that landlords were planning to increase the rent rolls in these properties by pushing up rents, even though the buildings were rent stabilized, because our rent laws were full of loopholes that allowed landlords to do that. Basically, where whether it was a 20% vacancy bonus when a tenant flipped over in a unit, or individual apartment improvements, or major capital improvements, fees that were tacked onto the rents because of that. When the 2019 laws came into effect in 2019, this changed the game, where it was no longer possible for landlords to bank on vacancy, to push out long-term tenants, and to raise the rents as much as they wanted, and to then use that to over-leverage their properties. So what we're seeing now is the rationalization of the market, where properties that were overleveraged and where their value was really overinflated are coming into a more neutral balance, essentially. So while the blame for the current market conditions lays really squarely with landlords and banks that gambled on the housing where New Yorkers live, the conditions are still real. These properties are indeed distressed and need something needs to happen with them. And this is where the city is able to step in. This is a great opportunity for the city to intervene and to rescue these buildings, and to use the programs that already exist, especially neighborhood pillars, to turn them into permanently affordable housing. It's great that we don't have to make up a new tool. We don't have to do new forms of legislation to make this happen. This is exactly what neighborhood pillars was designed for, exactly what it's meant to do. And the alternatives of not taking action are quite bad, because what will happen is we'll see another cycle of market consolidation, where private equity firms and other large investors will be able to buy up these properties that are now selling at a discount and to drive them further into disrepair. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Hillary, who's going to talk a little bit more about the budget.
Thanks, Oksana. So I want to reiterate that this is a capital budget ask. And so I just want to give a brief primer on the distinction between the capital budget and the expense budget. So the capital budget funds physical infrastructure and improvements, and is financed through borrowing, whereas the expense budget funds operating expenses and small ticket items like office supplies and the like, and is financed through taxes, fees, and grants from other governmental agencies. So the capital, one last point about the distinction here, the capital funding will go almost exclusively to the preservation and construction of physical housing units. So increasing the actual number of homes for people who need them. Next slide, please. So to give you a sense of the capital budget process, probably a lot of you are all too familiar with this process, but I just want to highlight two moments here in the capital budget calendar. One is March, the other is May. We are in the midst of budget hearings right now, and just want to highlight on March 11th, will be the hearing on housing and buildings. So March and May are really the times when debate and discussion and negotiation happen around the budgets that the mayor presents. And these are really important moments for us to intervene in the process and influence the level of appropriations for our priorities. And June is really the time horizon that we're looking for. The adopted budget in June is really when appropriations are solidified. So this is our target for this campaign. Next slide. So why are we calling for an infusion in capital funds for HPD? Oksana already laid out in detail the nature and the scale of the crisis. And as you can see here in the most recent preliminary budget that was released in January, the budget is proposing an average annual 10% decrease in HPD's budget. We know that the crisis isn't abating. It's not, things aren't going to be better 5 years from now. And so HPD's budget should not be decreasing, it should be increasing because the need for affordable housing is increasing. And so the $2 billion capital budget increase that we're calling for would be a 25% increase in what's currently being proposed. Next slide, please. So within HPD's budget, we also see that there's been a historically low investment in permanently affordable housing and shared equity ownership. In this table here are listed the biggest programs within HPD, affordable housing programs. And you can see that Open Door receives a relatively small amount of money, and clearly Neighborhood Pillars has not been funded at all. And so the $2 billion split between these programs on an annual basis means an infusion of $250 million per program per year. And this amount of funding really just brings these two programs in line with HPD's other affordable housing programs, with the added benefit of producing permanently affordable housing. And it also brings spending in line with the city's stated priorities. And so Sam is going to talk a little bit about what those priorities are. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. And I also wanted to note we have with us Councilmember Hanif. Thank you so much for joining us. And there was a note in the chat asking about sharing these slides. And yes, we'd be happy to email them to everybody who RSVP'd for the briefing. And if you're here but somehow didn't RSVP, reach out to us directly and we'll be happy to send it to you. So this campaign, Homes Now, Homes for Generation, links in very well with other things that are City Council priorities. Jumpstarting neighborhood pillars and expanding Open Door would be a major step toward achieving the speaker's fair housing framework that I think was just about universally supported in the council. The fair housing framework calls for an increase in opportunities to make homeownership affordable to working families by adjusting HPD's Open Door program. So it targets families earning less than $100,000 per year with extended down payment assistance. So we are echoing that call to make the program more expanded, both by expanding it to more households and also by expanding the budget for it. Next slide, please. Also in that fair housing framework, we had a call to expand funding and improve effectiveness of HPD's neighborhood pillars and landlord ambassador preservation programs for renters. And so that's what we're doing by calling to jumpstart neighborhood pillars. So both of these fit with the overall citywide fair housing framework and will push the city in the direction that the council has already affirmed is the right one. Next slide, please. These programs would also be really helpful in achieving the goals of two other popular bills in the council. The Community Opportunity to Purchase Act, or COPA, Intro 196, sponsored by Councilmember Rivera, would give a first chance to nonprofits and community land trusts to buy parcels when they go up for sale. Having a well-funded Neighborhood Pillars program could be the means to fund exactly that kind of preservation purchase. Next slide. Similarly, the Public Land for Public Good Bill, Intro 637, sponsored by Councilmember Ressler, would give a chance to nonprofits and community land trusts to build on public land before private firms got a first shot. We could be building shared equity homeownership housing with an expanded open door program and jumpstart the kind of very popular shared equity construction that Oksana spoke about earlier. Next slide, please. So that is our call. We want to jumpstart Neighborhood Pillars and expand Open Door. We would love to see as many of you as possible, both your principals and staff, at a rally this coming Monday, March 11th, 11 a.m. on the City Hall steps to call for this funding. We would be happy to do future presentations just like this for local groups in your district. If you think there might be interest in that, please be in touch. And yeah, we would love for everybody here to put this out as a top priority for the upcoming budget, both in conversations with the council leadership and with the administration and with the public, just talking about these as strong programs we already have that just need to be restarted and well funded. We would be happy to take questions at this point. So feel free to either unmute or to put yourself in the chat, or to even put the question in the chat and we'll answer that way. So folks, now is the time if you have questions.
Someone has their hand up, I see.
Oh,
it's Emily. Hi. Oh, I do. Can you guys just talk a little bit about the reason that Neighborhood Pillars was defunded, was like not funded to the level that it was promised, and yeah, how you account for that?
Sure, I can. I'm unmuted, so I can take a first shot, and others can add. So the program started in 2018, correct? Yeah. So 2018, it's launched and funded. It operates for about a year and a half, and then goes dormant. And the idea was when HSTPA was passed at the state level, the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, that was a major change to the rent stabilization laws. The city wanted to see what that would do to the market and was afraid that having a program where they would buy buildings would somehow distort the market. We don't really think that that's true, that it was such a small number of purchases compared to the overall market. But even if we accept that justification as the reason why it happened, now would be the time to restart it. The market is resetting. Now would be a great time to take advantage of that and to help move distressed buildings into community ownership. Anybody else want to add to that explanation? No. Okay, I see Isaac Blasenstein.
Yeah, thank you. You talk a little bit about kind of the funding mechanisms behind these two programs, and I guess my question is, do these rely on like LIHTC or other kind of like funding sources that are in limited supply. And then kind of related to that, I'll just kind of throw it out there for the group, like I'm seeing in our district that the HPD seems to be pushing um, nonprofit developers towards this mixed income market initiative. Uh, and so I'm kind of wondering how the launch of this new program might affect these, other programs that you all are trying to restart. And let me know if those questions make any sense.
I'm sorry, Isaac, could you just repeat the second half of your question about the mixed market or the mixed income initiatives?
Yeah, so we're hearing from HPD like a number of nonprofit developers or even for-profit developers have come to us saying they're going to build affordable housing on this land through the MIMI program, the Mixed Income Market Initiative, which has, I think maybe 30% of units are market subsidize the affordable. And they're saying this because they can like build it more quickly um, because they're not relying on these LIHTC uh, bonds. Um, so like instead of waiting a few years to supposedly get access to these, they can do it now with this new program. And so I'm just kind of trying to sort out, since this is kind of what I'm seeing in terms of projects that are coming forward, like how this new program might fit into HPD's budget and um, uh, you know, the ability to launch the or like expand these other two programs. And I'll also just add, I'm one of the few people who works on land use, doesn't work on budget, so perhaps my knowledge is not quite as broad here.
I could start by answering the first question. I don't have a lot of familiarity with with the particular development in in your district. But the whether neighborhood pillars or open doors will depend on LIHTC. So neither will because of the particular targeting of what neighborhood pillars and open doors are trying to achieve. So open door, LIHTC doesn't allow for the construction of any kind of homeownership, shared equity, or otherwise. So that would be a completely separate program. Um, with neighborhood pillars, the mix of subsidies that supports it are the kind of like tax exemption that every single development that is 100% affordable gets, or 100, whatever, like has a level of affordability, plus direct subsidy as described in the neighborhood pillars in the term sheets that support them. Where there's kind of like a more wonky side to this. This is purely a capital ask, but I think we would like to see some tweaks to the term sheets as well, just again, because of the major market changes that happened over the past 5 years that have created, yeah, like it's just like the income targeting looks really different now than it did 5 years ago. And I'm also going to ask to see if our Celeste Hornbach from the Controller's Office has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say so. What's interesting about the Neighborhood Pillars program too is that it makes funds available at acquisition, which is unique in terms of the HPD loan program. So the subsidy amount usually includes some estimate of what the sort of rehab or construction costs will be at the development or building. But that then gets like either increased or taken out when you close at construction and know exactly what the cost is going to be and sort of like right size the combination of city capital or city capital and other private sources. So LIHTC typically I'm just thinking about the neighborhood pillars projects that have gone through, which is a small number, obviously. It wouldn't be a good fit for LIHTC. LIHTC sort of needs a larger scale, usually larger buildings, or if it's like smaller, sort of like walk-up apartments, like we have all over the city, you need to sort of cluster them and spread the funding around so that you can just comply with the sort of rules of LIHTC to get to scale to be able to use it. So it's, I guess, all of that to say. It could use LIHTC depending on the sort of projects that comes through the pipeline. It might be a good fit for LIHTC at construction, but it doesn't rely upon it for the acquisition to like get the building out of the sort of speculative marketplace and put it on the preservation path.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question, Isaac. Ryan, we see your hand up.
Hey, I've gotten some questions about how this would interact with the mayor's City of Yes. And I know that's not the point of this briefing, but I'm hoping that some thought has been given to, especially the universal affordability program, despite its vagueness, like how, if or how, I guess sort of a neighborhood pillars would interact with that. Because when that question is posed to me, it's very difficult for me to answer, not only because UAP is very vague and City of Yes is still, the housing portion is still quite vague, but I don't know how it would work. And I'm wondering if y'all have a clear answer. And if that answer is no, that's fine.
My first thought is it's kind of like a apples and oranges, that that universal affordability program is about new construction on vacant lots, and how much of it is going to be market rate and how much is going to be income targeted. Neighborhood Pillars, is a preservation program where nonprofits and CLTs are buying the buildings. The incomes are the incomes that are in the building now. So just a different kind of program. And then in terms of Open Door, in some ways that's a closer, because that's a new construction program, but it's also a 100% affordable one. So I don't know that the zoning bonus would be helpful. If I'm thinking too constrictedly and anybody else has a more creative interpretation, please speak up. But I think these are more parallel tracks than intersecting ones.
That makes sense, because that's kind of what I've been saying. I was like, I don't think it does, but I just want to make sure.
If I could, I know that my job here is not to answer questions, it's to listen. I'm with the Manhattan Borough President's Office, but we have heard from DCP that UAP would be available for 100% affordable developments. It's not just for mixed income. I don't recall if it will be available for home ownership though. I believe it will, but I think that we're waiting for the details on that. But in terms of 100% affordable developments, I know for sure that if they are rental developments that they can get the density bonus, but I think we'll need to wait to hear about the home ownership side.
Great, thank you for that information, Jesse. And I think that can then be a thing to talk about in the hearings about the City of Yes, that if you want this to apply to shared equity home ownership, then it should be available to people who are going to build that kind of housing too. Other questions? I'm not seeing raised hands at the moment.
I can just flag a question that was asked in the chat because I was unable to answer. It's actually 3 questions. I was unable to answer one of the questions in the chat. It is Neighborhood Pillars is an affordable rental program, right? Can you clarify what is meant by community ownership?
Yeah, I could answer that. So Neighborhood Pillars is an affordable rental program, and that's kind of the balance that we're trying to draw here, where there is both rental. Neighborhood Pillars being focused on rental buildings, multifamily rentals, and then Open Doors being focused on shared equity homeownership. It's a little bit more specific than that too, just because it is a preservation program for existing multifamily rentals as opposed to a new construction program. And while I believe it's open to any kind of multifamily building, the kind of like the state of the market now is that the distress is largely in over leveraged or unstabilized properties that were neglected by their landlords for a long time. So that is, while I think that like ideally it's open to any kind of building that's in that state, it's really going to be focused on that on those types of buildings. Oh, and the second part of your question, community ownership. This is, we're talking about mission-driven developers, so those that are rooted in their communities in any kind of way. It could be community development corporations that have done this type of work since the 80s. It could be newer community-led trusts as well.
Okay, last call for questions from the audience. Again, thank you all for joining and for staying. Hearing nothing else, I want to remind everybody. Whoops.
No, I just think thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's go back to one slide, Oksana. Yeah, so we have our rally this coming Monday at 11 a.m. City Hall steps. Hope to see as many of you there as possible. And again, we're happy to do more presentations like this for other groups. So if you'd like that, reach out to us. Also, if you have any further follow-up questions, we're definitely happy to engage. So thanks again, everybody. Hope to see you on Monday.